So we are live.
Last I checked, I was still
live. First of all, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. I'm really sorry for misunderstanding the time. Facebook has changed their platform, so there's a lot of things that are not working properly. So first of all, I want to thank you for accepting my invitation, and well, for me, it's really surreal to have you on my show because I'm a huge fan of your work and DC Comics in general. And what I do often to my guests is to ask them if they can introduce themselves, but I don't know. We can spend the next hour just just doing that. So I don't know, if just a quick introduction, because my audience is very broad. There are musicians.
So my name is Paul Levitz, and I was one of the sort of the tail end of the first generation of comic fans in America. Started a fanzine when I was a kid in high school. In those days, pretty much all the comics in America were done out of New York City. So as a New York kid, I was able to wander in and out of offices and ask stupid questions. And it was a TV guide, basically, for the field at the time. In the 1970s, the publishers didn't always tell fans anything much about what was coming or what the credits were, in many cases. Got to know a lot of the people in the industry. And when I was in high school, got invited to start freelance writing, things like letters to the editor page, and went on from there. Started filled in that summer as an assistant editor, never left. Ended up editing the Batman titles, then moving to the business side of the company, and under one job title or another, basically serving as chief operating officer and then chief executive of the company for about 30 years at DC Comics. Nowadays, I still write an occasional comic, serve on the board of one of the smaller publishers, Boom, and do an awful lot of teaching.
Teaching? Okay. So what do you teach exactly?
So I teach courses that are either driven around the graphic novel or around writing, sort of the two main subject areas I know. So this term, it's writing the graphic novel at Pace University, the business of comics and graphic novels in Pace's master's program. They do a master of science in publishing, and a writing for the media course at Manhattanville College, small liberal arts college in the New York area. Varies a little bit from term to term.
Sure. No, for me it's fascinating because you are witness of all the evolution of the industry of comics since the very beginning. When was
I'm not old enough for
no. I mean, sorry. Well, I wasn't mean that. I mean when was kind of successful, but was not like the boom like in the 2000s or on the 90s when people were buying like a stock, you know, like there was a lot of speculation, and then right now that is kind of I don't know, a new thing, because most of the comic now are movies or TV shows. So do you think that affect a little the I don't know, the medium itself? Like now people can go and watch Avengers movie, Batman movies, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of effects. One, which is very beneficial, is a lot of money is being thrown around to creative people to develop properties, either in the form of options or purchases for movie or TV rights, or just small companies that were started up dreaming that, you know, they'd be the next Marvel Comics or the next DC Comics and be able to sell the business for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in a few years. The more complicated effect that we don't really know the answer to is whether things like the movies and the TV shows are an additional nice thing for people who already liked superhero adventures or comic book style adventures, or whether they're a substitute. And, you know, certainly in America, not a lot of people like to read. So the movies and TV shows can reach a much wider audience. That's unquestionably great. But are some of the people who are watching the movies and TV shows people who would otherwise have started reading comics? We don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's kind of, well, I don't know. Because, well, I'm a musician. I'm 43 years old. I have been, I started to play when, I don't know, when I was 18. So I saw a little of the progression also of the music industry. And kind of like I see a little bit resembles when, for example, when people were buying cassettes and CDs or before vinyl, and then the MP3 stuff start to explode, and now streaming. But the thing is, people, they are still buying vinyl, even if they don't listen to it. That's the weird stuff. Because they listen everything on Spotify or Deezer, but they like the object. So for me, I see a little the future of the industry like that, you know, like because, for example, when you buy a vinyl these days, you have a promo code to download the stuff, but now no one downloads stuff. Everything is streamed. So maybe, well, I see the future kind of like that. Like people can buy it digitally or physically or both, you know, and they will keep the physical stuff, well, if they want to read it, or just collect it, and we're gonna be more digital. But because it's, the young generation that are used to that, they are.
Well, there is no giant surge in digital.
I'll be right back. It's just okay. Sorry.
There's no giant surge in digital sales of comics.
No.
No,
but that was what I mean. You have to sell it together. You know, like if you sell it together.
It's been tried.
Really?
The comics that are reaching wide audiences digitally are the web comics, which are put up for free, generally, and the creators have to make a living either through Patreon or eventually through trade paperbacks or other collections being made of the material. You're certainly right that the younger generation loves getting things through a screen, but comics that were designed originally for print don't come across really well on a screen. Comics that are natively created for digital environments are more successful in that fashion, but that's a fairly small portion of the business at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know why someone don't came up with kind of a tablet that is the exact same size of a comic book. It's just a little bit more smaller, or I don't know. Well, you really have seen something like
that big a business that people are designing electronics just to serve it.
Yeah, that's right. But for you have some, because I know you still are connected with the industry. Do you see a kind of a future of the industry, like kind of a trend or something like that?
We're in a wonderful period of creativity. The graphic, at least in America, the graphic novel is one of the fastest growing print media around. We're seeing young people create graphically in ways that they never have before, and in quantities that they never have before. So I think it's a lovely time for comics on a lot of levels. There are parts of the business that have their challenges, obviously.
Mm.
And clearly this insane year of the virus and lockdowns and everything that's attached to that isn't doing anybody any good on any level of any business. Maybe the vaccine makers will eventually make a fortune, but everybody else is having a pretty horrible time. The comic shops that I'm aware of are mostly coming through it okay, thank God, and that'll keep the industry healthy.
Yeah, and yeah, I saw that you posted a video recently, it's like a campaign to help comic book shops.
Bill Shanis, who's a longtime pioneer in the business, he had been at one of the first independent publishers, Pacific, had a comic shop when he was a kid, and then spent decades at Diamond Comics heading their buying department, has started a campaign called Give Comics Hope to raise money for the comic shops that had larger problems as a result of the lockdowns. And many of us are donating things out of our collections or our archives that'll be in auctions, I think in the next month, to raise money for the shops. Well, it's a good cause. It's worth looking up. GiveComicsHope.org.
GiveComicsHope.org. And that is a campaign. Is just one state, or is every comic book shop in North America?
If enough money is raised, it'll go wherever it's needed.
Okay. No, that's amazing. And can you tell us a little about the initiative, the Hero Initiative?
Sure. I mean, that's been around for, God, I don't know, maybe almost 20 years now. And that's really devoted to a similar goal, but helping the comics professionals who are in need. It really was originally set up around the fact that the golden age comic book writers and artists were generally not well paid and were not able to put lots of money away for their old age. So their original slogan was "Everyone deserves a golden age." And
and was your idea, or was a collective idea between?
I have nothing. I've had nothing to do with that except writing them a check every now and then and kibitzing an idea with Jim McLaughlin, who's been running it for years, occasionally.
No, that's great because I think now people these days, they see superhero movies, they know that came from comics, but they don't know too much how it was working before. That most of the artists was like just freelancers, no contract, no.
And some, depending on the part of comics history you're talking about, some of them had contracts that ranged for several years. Some had contracts just for individual jobs. In many cases, the rates of pay were pretty normal for commercial art in America, but the nature of being a freelancer is your work can evaporate, and there weren't great programs in the 40s and 50s for people to save for retirement. The idea of tax-advantaged retirement funds really comes a couple of decades later. There weren't pension funds for these people. And, the starving artist is an old joke, but it's not really a joke. Lots of artists end up hungry in pretty much any creative field in America. So
no, it's crazy because I think especially with this pandemic, with COVID, you can see how our economical system have not really they have artists in general, they're struggling a lot, most of them, but now with COVID I think is more evident, the fragility of.
Look, the world's economy has been screwed up by this virus. Commerce is not taking place as it usually does. Depending on what industry you're in, if you're an actor, wonderfully talented Broadway actors who would regularly get stage gigs. There's no Broadway right now.
Yeah.
And there's no Broadway for some time to come. We don't know exactly when that may change. If you were a singer and you made your money performing,
like most of the musicians these days,
not a lot of concerts. I have a neighbor who's a musician who made his living playing at cafes. New York doesn't have cafes open that have people performing in them right now. So there are lots of challenges that are maybe worse than what the comic book writers and artists are facing.
Sure. No, but when I talk about art, for me, it's the same. Like, for example, writers, comic books, books, music, the art in general. I think kind of on our society, even if we love it, in our economical society, it didn't have a priority. I mean, and
it depends on how you look at it, Ivan. You know, that we consume a tremendous amount of creative content as a society.
Sure.
We enjoy watching TV, watching movies. We enjoy seeing art on murals painted on buildings. And the most successful people in the arts make very, very good livings in the last century. But a career in art is very volatile. You know, if mom and dad convince you to become an accountant growing up or a school teacher, you know, Will Eisner, the famous graphic novelist, his mother had been a school teacher. The father had been a set painter for the theater. And he was sort of pushed between the two things. And, you know, mom really wanted him to become a teacher because teachers always eat. They don't make a lot of money. Artists, some small number of artists in any kind of form of art can make a lot of money. And an awful lot of artists make almost no money or not enough to live properly.
Yes.
It's a much more volatile way to make a living. It has its own satisfactions, obviously, what you get to do creatively, but it's a challenging life in a capitalist world.
Yeah. And I think especially in the States, because, for example, I can talk about music. Before, it was really hard to buy instruments and record. You have to record in a studio that you will, if you wanted to record in a good studio, was really expensive. And with technology, the stuff is the access to make music and record music, it would become easier and easier, and that was a good thing. Except that how the market works is like it start to, you know, get saturated. Too many musicians, and I don't know if in the comic book industry there are more musicians than labels. That's why that's what I mean. But I don't know.
In pretty much every creative industry, you used to have gatekeepers.
Sure.
You know, if you compare the creative arts to, let's say, sports. If you don't get yourself on a major league team in whatever your sport is by 22 or whatever age, you know you're not going to have a career in sports, and you better figure out something else to do with your life. In the arts, the challenge is you can hang in on the edges of any of these fields, whether it's music, recording your own work, putting it up on a file sharing system where you make some money if somebody actually listens to it. You are doing comics, make your own comics, put them up as a web comic, or self-publish through Amazon or Comixology or whatever the case may be. But you can be creating and nobody can be listening, except maybe your mother and your best friend. And they keep telling you, you're really special, you're doing something wonderful, and maybe you are, but nobody's damn listening. And
or maybe you don't.
you kind of gently starve to death until you wake up one morning and say, maybe I should do something else.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I think it's so the world of art in general is so tough. And when you decided to, okay, I was gonna work in the comic book industry, I don't know, you were pretty young, if I'm correct. So your parents, what say to you? Like, yeah, go for it, or was like, are you crazy?
Well, look, I started doing it part-time when I was 16, and I was going to DC a couple days a week and cramming all my college courses into 2-3 days a week. So from my parents' point of view at that point, it's great. The kid's paying for his own college education. He's working productively. He's doing something he loves. Wonderful. A couple of years into it, when I said, okay, I'm going to drop out of college now and do this full time, that was a little less popular decision at home. But by that time, I was making a good living, and I was independent, living on my own. So my parents could just sort of groan and moan a little bit, say, are you sure, dear? And go on, you know. And it was a risky decision. You know,
take a lot of courage.
I don't know about courage, but I don't know that I assessed the risks properly at 19 years old. I don't think most of us do make very deep decisions at 19, even if we make big decisions. But you know, I took my chances on it. It worked out really well, far better than I could ever have expected. I was very lucky.
So you started in what year?
I started the Fanzine in 71. I made my first sale to DC at the end of 72 and went on staff in 73.
So around that time when you start to work for DC Comics, with your friends, you tell, yeah, I work for DC Comics, and they were aware what the comic book industry was. So,
well, I mean, most of my friends were people who were in the same circumstance. They were young people who were breaking into comics. My non-comics friends, I went to a very strange and special high school in New York, Stuyvesant High School, which
why is special?
It's a very competitive school to get into. You get in on the basis of a test, and it's basically, it doesn't matter what your previous grades were. It doesn't matter what your interests are. The top, whatever it is, 700 or 1,000 kids a year who score on the test get invited to come in. And most of the students who've gone through it over the years feel that it was tougher than any college they went to after that, or any grad school. And it's produced, I think, 4 Nobel Prize winners. In my time there, my time in the school overlaps with David Axelrod, who was Obama's main campaign manager, Paul Reiser of Mad About You, a guy named Eric Lander, who was one of the heads of Decoding the Human Genome Project. Wow. And, you know, just a wide variety of really smart and bizarre people. And the thing about the school at the time, and the thing that was enormously rewarding for me, on a social basis, nobody really gave a damn what you were interested in, as long as you were actually doing something interesting with it. So it was just as valid to be the weird kid who liked comics as it was to be the weird kid who liked biology and managed to talk himself into an internship at one of the top laboratories in New York. But you had to be doing something. Sure. And that was the main reaction to my world. Was what? That's strange, but okay. But cool.
Oh, that's cool. But you were always, since the beginning, you were trying to, I don't know, you were happy just to be part of the industry, or you were always trying to, you know, push a little bit forward?
Well, originally I figured use it to pay my way through college, and then I get an honest job doing something else. But when it started to work out, I like this field. Let me see what I can do. You know, the goal at the end of the day, I think for most of us, should be to leave the things that we touch a little bit better than how we found them.
I completely agree.
You know, that can be in music. That can simply be writing a song that people love to hear or love to sing. In writing, it can be writing stories that people enjoy reading. In running a business, it can be improving the model of the business. The people who are in it or the people who consume it. And I like to think that I did a fair measure of that in the different roles I've had in my life so far. And hopefully as a teacher, I'm still continuing to, and occasionally I'm touching the life of some kid and helping put them on a path of their life.
Oh, that's great. And well, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were kind of very influential to what we were talking before, to the artists get treated more fairly.
Well, I came in the business at a time when the models of the business had to change. We were shifting from the newsstand in America to the comic shop as our main place that we were selling comics. And that really created an opportunity for a number of us to have an effect on how the talent was being dealt with. And, you know, I had the privilege of being part of the team that designed the first broad-based royalty program for comics freelancers in the mainstream of American comics. I wrote the first standard contract that began to be used in the field.
Can you explain a little bit about that to the people that are not aware?
There's a significant difference between American copyright law and European copyright law. European copyright law is very much in favor of the individual creator. In France, you have what's called the droit moral. I'm probably mangling the pronunciation. I apologize. The moral rights of authors.
Right is droit.
Droit.
Droit moral.
Sorry, 4 years of French, I learned nothing.
No, don't worry.
I apologize. But these moral rights can't be signed away by contract. The rules of copyright say, no matter what, if you created the work, you're entitled to have your name on it. You're entitled to have creative control over it. A series of rights. In America, the copyright law has been dominated by a balance between rights for the creative people and rights for the companies that
hire,
finance them, exploit them, distribute them. And it's in the early years of American comics, that balance tilted very heavily to the companies. And they would buy all the rights to everything to do with the original comic book characters and the original comic strips for flat fees, so that if you created a character that the world loved and cared about, you might never see another cent from it besides what you got paid for the story that you turned in.
Like Superman.
The individual cases are very complicated. Creators,
no, but I mean before, like the first time when they buy
the creators who created Superman sold all rights with the first story. They got very good deals in the years following that and made what would be in modern terms millions of dollars.
Sure.
But then they got in a fight with the company because they felt they weren't getting enough. And then they got nothing for 30 years after that. Then there was another argument, and they got decent money for the rest of their lives. And yet another fight, and in some cases their heirs are making more money than they made in their lifetimes.
Sure.
But most writers and artists didn't make a lot of money. And the more equitable form I would argue, of any sort of arrangement is where everybody's interests are, we'd use the word aligned. If the company does well, you will do well.
And a balance.
Yeah. And we managed, in the early 80s, we managed to change a lot of the standards of how the American comic book industry worked to move more to those kinds of directions. There's a wide variety of different contracts used today, different kinds of deals, because the industry has grown tremendously and the effect of the movie and TV involvement has changed it still further. But the reality is, if you created a character the world cared about from the early 80s onward in comics, you were likely to do very well in it. You can always argue what exactly is the right amount of money that each party should share in any given deal. But at least in pretty much all of these circumstances, if somebody did well, everybody did well. And
that's great.
That was a very healthy change.
So you were involved on redact that kind of contract on DC during your time?
I was one of the team that built all of those changes, yes.
And you have some kind of backlash, like, Paul, are you crazy?
You know, at the end of the day, it's really good business to have the people who are working with you motivated to do their best work. There's always argument in any business environment about how much is enough and what the right number is. And all sides of any deal are always going to be able to argue that it's not enough, or it's too much. But that's the ordinary course of business.
No, but yeah, I think sometime in America there's a unique approach of seeing business. Like, I don't know, for me, here in Europe, that is kind of really kind of the base of an agreement is like, well, after years of a struggle here, you have to win a salary that allow you to a living salary, you know, discussion like that. But I feel like sometime in America there's always hard to convince business to I don't know, give a living wage. Like, for example, what happened with fast food or all that kind of protest.
If you look at the macro of the American economy versus European economies, generally speaking, the European economies have a better safety net for people at the bottom. You have government health care. It's not always perfect health care. All the resources aren't necessarily available because there isn't enough to go around. But the basic routines of health care are definitely covered. You have an attempt to give people a living wage on a general basis. And you generally have much higher taxes, both on the working people and much higher taxes on the wealthy people in America. In America, there's a fascinating belief among people that can win. The researchers have done things like ask people in America who are, you know, like college age, what are you making now? What do you expect to be making 10 years from now? And the answers they get for the now are usually pretty accurate. They average out to about the norm of Americans. And the 10 years out is astronomically better than the average American will do. In that sense, it's a country of optimists. So
it's like everyone is a potential millionaire.
There's a belief in that. And the reality is in America that you can change your class structure, your class economic position within a generation or two in a very radical way. I'm a first-generation American. My mother came from Poland as a 7-year-old, not speaking a word of English, without any money in the family's pockets. Her father had been over here for a few years. He was working 16, 17 hours a day in a newspaper kiosk to support his family. Pretty bottom of the food chain kind of work. Sure. This was in the years of the Depression. I ended up, however you want to measure it, in the economic elite of the country as a business success. And my children went to some of the best colleges, some of the best graduate schools, and had obvious signs of privilege the whole time they were growing up. That still happens in America with some reasonable frequency. It doesn't happen to everybody. The good part of it is it does happen. The bad part of it is we have a culture that believes it can happen more often or more easily than it actually does. So you have a lot of support for, well, no, we can't tax the wealthy that much because I'm going to be wealthy someday. And I don't want to be taxed like that. Well, you probably aren't going to be. But okay, if you want to vote for the idiot who says that we should be nice to rich people and don't worry about poor people, I can't stop you.
Yeah, but I don't know. We pay more taxes here than in America, because I remember one time I made a tour there. It was in 2012, but I was surprised when they, I don't know, we were in a hotel or in a restaurant, and I saw the bill. It was very specific, like estate tax, that government tax, that tax.
Well, the analyses I've seen over the years, the income tax rates in Europe are much more significant. The VAT tax, that is your usual version of a sales tax, is for most of the European countries is usually about 15%. Sales taxes in America, depending on what part of the country you're in, hover around 8 or 10%. Hotel taxes usually are higher. We screw the hell out of tourists. We want them to come to America, come to New York. We'll show you a good time. You're going to leave all your money here. Thank you very much. And that's fine. You know, those are people who can afford it. But the ordinary American, on average, pays less in taxes than the ordinary European, and they get less from the government in exchange.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to. I would like to have more information about that, because it's really. I don't know. I was surprised because when I was there, I was expecting exactly that. Like it will be way more cheaper, and I don't know. I was surprised that every state, on top of the kind of the regular tax, was the state tax and different kind of taxes. So I say, come on, you're paying a lot of taxes. But for me, the problem is that the taxes are not being used correctly, you know, in the rest of.
You know, we're all capable of sitting and saying, you know, you're not doing it the way I would do it, and I think I would do it more fairly.
Yeah.
I think in America, there's a lot of people who believe we're not spending our tax dollars in the right places because we still have significant problems of homelessness in the big cities. But you know, it's very easy to sit in the back row and criticize what's going on the stage.
Yeah, of course. No, for me, I'm just giving my view. I'm not the president,
but you wouldn't want to be, but you couldn't fail to be of the moron we've got right now.
Yeah, no, but I think there's a lot of Americans that actually don't. I know you're a very well educated man, but for me, most of America, they unfortunately unfortunately they don't travel a lot, so they don't know what is happening in the other countries. So they believe what they tell them, and they don't have anyone that say, for example, I can give my perspective from what is happening in France. You know, we pay a lot of taxes, but the standard of living is really, we have, I don't know, less violence. If you get sick, you don't. Yeah, I don't know. Like there was a funny.
We have a lot of Americans who don't get a great education. We have a lot of Americans who don't read on their own. And we have a lot of Americans who can't find, well, they probably could, probably could find France on the map. I guarantee you that you can find Belgium. And you know, Europe has the advantage of being older, maybe wiser. Europe also has the advantage that the countries are small and close to each other. So it's not very expensive to travel and see different culture, different way of doing things. Some of it's been homogenized in the post-war years, the years of the EU. But you set foot in England, you set foot in France, you know you're in a different place, even if you can't hear a word of the language. There's differences in stores, there's differences in the food, there's differences in the attention people pay to a haircut. You know, if you lined up Europeans in a lineup, I think you can probably pick the French out because they have the best haircuts. Maybe the Italians come close. America's a big country, and it's easy for people to just stay here and just look inward. And some of it is foolish.
Yeah. And do you have any, I don't know, I know there's an upcoming election. Do you have any kind of expectations, or what do you think what's going to happen?
I think it's going to be loud and messy, and I hope to God Trump loses and goes to hell. He's a horrible human being. We knew he was a horrible human being in New York City, where he was part of the culture for many years, but nonetheless he managed to win the election. A lot of us were concerned about what would happen. And
you ever have the chance to meet him or see him or know someone that?
Oh, I know a number of people who knew him personally. I didn't know him personally at any point.
So what was the story that you were listening about him was like? Was exactly like the
story, but
what?
It's somebody else's story to tell. It's not mine. It's not my life.
Oh, okay, no, it's okay.
This is a man who was known, his family business that his father set up and that he ran, blocked people of certain races from renting apartments in their buildings. The government had attacked them in a more reasonable year, arguing about that. Lots of stories, lots of problems.
Yeah, no, I guess.
And even his history aside, as soon as he began running for office and he began to demonize certain groups of people, the Mexicans very early on, then that's just not a fit person for office, in my point of view. And you can see the messes that we've had as a result. So I certainly, you know, I think there'll be a lot of us voting this year, not so much voting for Biden, who, according to everyone I know who knows him, is a very decent human being and a hardworking man. But not so much voting for him as voting for, please God, get any decent person in there for Donald Trump.
True.
And with any luck, that'll work.
Yeah. No, sometimes it's really like we are living in a comic book. Like
I wouldn't write a comic book with this much of a mess in it. I wouldn't dare. That may be a good place to end the conversation, though. Let's get out of living in a comic book and let's live in a better world next year, with any luck.
Yeah, sure. Right? No, I really thank you for taking the time to. I know you're a busy guy. I just want to I don't know, invite you if you have any website or any project you're working at the moment, something
Sure.
that you would like to share.
So the website is paullevitz.com.
Mm.
I don't update it a lot, but there's a few fun things there, and occasionally I put a new story or something like that. In the spring, I have a graphic novel coming from Dark Horse. A priest, a rabbi, and a minister walk into a bar, except they're all dead, and they're there to find out what their unfinished business is. And it's drawn by Simon Fraser, who's a wonderfully talented Scotsman living in the US for quite a number of years now. I have a couple of issues of The Visitor coming from Valiant Publishing this fall, finishing up the miniseries that got interrupted by COVID, and there'll be a trade paperback of that fall, spring, somewhere in there. And other projects that haven't been announced.
Okay. No, that's great. Can I ask you just something very quickly? Because I saw that maybe Milestone will gonna be.
I saw the same something you saw that they've announced doing something new with DC. I certainly hope it works.
Yeah, because I saw a picture that you have in your profile when you was kind of launching Milestone.
Yeah, back in '92. That popped up on Facebook again recently.
Yeah, no, for me that's great because it was really game changing.
Those guys worked harder than any human beings I've ever seen. It was a wonderfully noble effort. It didn't hit a home run at the time, but Static became a favorite character for a generation of kids through the animated series, and I hope it comes back and is a terrific success. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Levitz.
Take care of yourself, Ivan.